Hey, hello, everyone. This is Pete Bickford on Comic Base TV. Yes, and hopefully with sound. Yes, yes. Lovely, beautiful, gorgeous sound. Welcome to the first live stream. Well, actually, now the second live stream of 2023. We had a little bit of technical issues on the first go around on this one. Thank you, everyone who made the extra effort to find our link again. And there's another advantage to having linked and to subscribe to the Comic Base TV channel, so you can keep up, so you can keep up with all the merriment that's going on with StreamYard and all the other funny technical things that we're doing. I was feeling so good about this one too because all sound check dialed in. I was like, got my headphones on. Like, we're gonna rock this one today. It's like, but anyway, here we are again, and we're just gonna push on. So thank you everyone who made it here, especially everyone. Thomas B, you're first out of the door this round out here. Andre, great to see you again. Robin Weinberg, Ed Billiat, our Ahmad, Greg Hecht is in the house, of course, and. Thomas B says, "This concludes my analysis of the comic book state of the comic book market in 2023. Any questions?" Yeah, no, yeah, we'll get to it. All right, guys. Well, what we're going to be doing today, this is normally these live streams for about an hour or so. We will talk about all things comics and comic basey related and try to answer as many of your questions as I possibly can. This time out, I'm going to be going on a little bit of a special one in that I'm going to try to give you my top 5 tips that I could come up with for having a better time as a comic collector in 2023. And sort of in the spirit of the Jordan Peterson 12 rules for life, this is our 5 rules for happier comic book collecting, which is, of course, to say that there's about 153 tips rolled into these 5. Nothing about lobsters, though, if you understand the Jordan Peterson reference. So luckily on that one. Yeah, we'll get into that one in just a second here. And looks like, okay, I think, well, we're starting a critical mass in the chat here, so I think we're going to get off and running on it. So I'm going to try to steer this one pretty much through the magic of our soundboard here, of just the media players. Let's see how that goes. So all right, so there we are. There's our big first graphic here. But so yeah, these tips here, and what I'm really focusing on here isn't just how to be a better comic base user or something like that. It's just how to be happier as a comic collector. It's not always the easiest thing in the world, but let's see if I can boil it down, and we'll take it from there. And by the way, if you like this sort of thing, please do hit the like and subscribe and button on the channel. It does help, especially on days like today. And let's take it away. All right. Tip number 1 of 5. The difference between hoarding and collecting is organization. Look, if your comic collection resembles an episode of Hoarders, I mean, we all get in a mode where, like, we say, "Hey, there's a lot of great stuff in there." I mean, look at that. That's a 1943 collectible but no, without organization, you don't have a collection. You just have a mess. And you really got to get on top of that one. And it really does start with the physical aspect of things. When I was looking for, I should say, I'm one of my guilty pleasures in life is the show Hoarders, which whenever I need to do a spring cleaning in my house, it's if just watch an episode of that one and you will get religion in a hurry. Let's see if I can bring up a key so I can get on camera myself here. When I was looking around for graphics to demonstrate this sort of thing in particular, came across this one quite recently over in Nottingham, England. This is some poor guy's, stuffed to the rafters, collection of everything. But in with the stuff to the collection rafter of everything were things like this. The problem, of course, is that they were all just splattered everywhere. The news, I think the Daily Mirror was reporting on this one, and they thought that if he could get this stuff together, they think he's got $1 million or £1 million worth of books in there. And honestly, from what I could tell, I think they're probably understating it quite a bit. Amongst other things, along with the usual comic books and other things that crazy hoarder people collect, tons and tons of other collectibles, including things like, here's the Daily Telegraph's coverage of President Kennedy being assassinated on that day. So for all throwing a bone to all the newspaper collectors out there in the world. But yeah, it's if your stuff isn't organized, it's just a mess. It's a pain to everyone who deals with it, and it's just worth less. One of the biggest things you can do to add value to your collection is simply get it in order. Write down what you've got, know where it is, and so forth, and that creates value right then and there. You don't need to buy anything different. You simply need to make it usable as a collection. By the way, I also came across this one here. It's not called, if you're poor, it's called hoarding. If you're rich, it's called collecting. only partially true. Really, guys, it's all about it's all about the physical end of things. Well, and let's talk about that a little bit. So I'm gonna say, look, when you talk about getting your collection organized, the number one thing, look, I mean, look, we sell comic book software. Comic Base is an amazing tool for getting, your collection, under some kind of management and so forth, and dealing with large things. It's a great tool, but even then, even though we sell comic base, I'm going to tell you the number one thing you ought to focus on, if you haven't done so already, is the physical end of your comic collection. Worry about the computer stuff once you've got the physical stuff, under wraps. And by the way, and now's good time for me to, because I had to reboot my machines here, so I was furiously trying to pull everything up. Now would be a really great time to pull up my show notes, because I had a chance before the show to put my thoughts in order, and that's a good thing. Let me just go ahead and pull that up right here. All right, so start out, number one is, get your workspace organized. So I mean, looking just around your desk wherever you're working, wherever you've got your comic books and everything, is it clear? Have you got places to put things down? Have you just got little, bunches of junk, laying around everywhere on things? If so, before you do anything else, get that part clean. I mean, get it so that literally everything you can reach out with your hands and touch is exactly where it ought to be. There's nothing there that shouldn't be there, and it's as clean as you can possibly make it. I mean, just go for like a 6 foot, diameter of control around yourself, and work outward from there as you go about that thing. But get at least a little zone of kind of sanity around you before you worry about the outside world. Once you've got your immediate workspace, just it's functional in some way, get your supplies in order. So, I mean, if you're a comic book collector, there's stuff you're going to need, right? You're going to need bags, you're going to need boards, etc. You're going to, tape if you don't have self-adhesive. If you don't use self-adhesive comic bags, you'll need Scotch tape, title dividers, any kind of backing boards. Get it all ready, and get it also so that you can reach out without exerting any kind of real effort, and reach out and grab all the things you need in order to do your hobby. It also doesn't hurt to pre-stage as much of the stuff as possible, because it makes for less piles. So, for instance, if you collect current and Silver Age books, have 100 Silver Age bags and boards laying around that are ready to go. Have as many current comic bags and boards ready to go as you are. And if you get a chance while watching the ball game or doing something else, pre-stuff all the bags. Stick the board into the bag, or if you're really really well off, you can actually buy them pre-stuffed, but they're like 15 cents for a combo, which is ridiculous. But use some of that downside and just take down the chaos level of that sort of thing, so that when you do have a new comic book that comes in your life, managing it, getting it into the next stage is automatic sort of thing. Number two, part C, get enough supplies to do the job. So, I mean, get all the bags and boards for all the types of comics you collect. If you occasionally collect magazines, have magazine bags, laying around. Get ones that are actually the right size for the comic books that are in your life. Nothing looks lamer than when you're taking like an oversized like Life magazine bag, and you're cross taping it around the spine, everything, to try to fit some awkwardly sized Acme Comics novelty library into it. This is not a big investment, but it is a little bit of time investment, just of knowing that at some point in my life, I'm going to need this sort of thing. Putting it on a shelf, labeling where it is on the shelf so you can get to it in a hurry, and just having it ready so that you don't have to Frankenstein everything, as the word goes. When you are storing your comic books, make sure that you've replaced any kind of comic storage boxes that have gotten beat up, or that you've got taped 16 different ways in order to keep them together. I noticed note to myself says this: we've checked with your girlfriend and or spouse. She says it's totally cool with her if you buy all the supplies you need to get that dang pile of comic books off your desk and organize in a proper way. She's totally good with this, so go ahead and do it. So yeah, just make the investment in the organization. It's going to take the hassle away from the day to day, because if you don't make it easy to do the day to day organization, automatically it isn't going to get done. And then finally, once you've kind of taken care of just your space, you've got a place for all your books, you've got the supplies to use the whole thing. At that point, worry about your computer, right? That's the last end of the physical organization that I would worry about is, make sure you've got all the labels you need, make sure you've got a barcode scanner so you can get the books entered quickly like that. If you have a label printer, make sure that also is within reach so you can very quickly generate labels and stick them on books and so forth. Get that. So also that's ergonomic in your workspace. But worry about the computer stuff after you worry about the physical stuff for managing the comics themselves and just life around things. Have a flat surface that is not occupied by 15 other things. It's always a challenge, but it's well worth doing. Some other folks who come in here. Um, yes, item number one in show notes. Yeah, plug in the audio cables. I swear to God, they were plugged in. Anyway, by the way, happy to Larry's Library. Mark D with a C. Some of the other folks came in here, and yeah, so let's go. All right, so that is number one. All right, number two. For a happier comic life, let's go back over the whole thing. Grade once, grade right. All right. Look, when it comes down to grading comic books, no one likes doing it. Well, I'm sure there's some twisted people who enjoy this sort of thing, but I mean, it seems like a big pain. It's the number one thing that even experienced, comic shops will be like, I don't know. It might be VF. They'll put a grade on it, see if it flies. Sometimes people actually do the opposite thing. They'll undergrade books that they really shouldn't. It's like, well, I didn't want to be, I didn't want to be too harsh on the whole thing. So, I had a early, key edition Hulk or something, Hulk number one or something, and I thought, well, it might be VG, but I'm not sure. So I'll put it down as good. Doing that is slicing $10,000 off the value if you are doing it. Learn how to do grading. It's a skill that you just kind of need to pick up as you go, because when you're talking about comic books, the grade in many senses is the comic. A comic book that was sold as near mint, and if you try to substitute with something that isn't fine, you're going to get people wanting to kill you. And the same thing goes for it radically changes the value of the comic book. If you guys have ever looked at the price curves on Comic Base or anything else, the difference between a near mint comic is in fresh off the newsstand and one that's just a little tiny bit worse, little tiny quarter-inch bend in the corner that doesn't even break the color, that reduces to a grade called very fine. You think, what's the big deal? Well, the big deal is it just lost a third of its value. And then it goes down from there. So, I mean, don't be, it's worth your time to not be approximate about your grading, to really, I mean, there are standards for how it's done. Take the time, learn how to use the standards. Use the grading wizard in Comic Base is a really big help on that one. So if you don't know what grade something is in your collection, double click on the grade. There's a little question mark right next to it. But double click on the comic book, hit the little question mark next to the grade, and it'll pull up a grading wizard in Comic Base, which will actually just quiz you about the book itself. Say, all right, well, let's look at state of cover bends. Have you got any at all? Do they break the color? How big are they? And so forth. And just by looking at the book and saying, oh, well, let's see, I got this little problem, this little problem, this little problem, and just filling out the appropriate thing, it'll tell you what the grade is of that book. If you helps, I mean, sometimes you get into some things that feel a little bit like a judgment call when you talk about things like page whiteness, or there's things like is the surface wear minor, or is it or is it significant? The grading guide standards could be a little weird on that one. Or what the devil is foxing? If you don't know the term, it refers to a little bit of gunk and mold that can accumulate on comic books if they were stored in a dampish location. But if you don't know what those things are, pick up a copy of the Overstreet Grading Guide. It's set you back like $20-25, and it has photo reference on all this stuff. It'll make the whole thing very, very clear, and it's worth getting good at this. Once you've done a box of comic books and really gone to town and graded them properly, honestly, you can grade a comic book in a minute. Or at least I'll put it this way: most comic books you can grade instantly, if not unless they have hidden damage. Like if someone clipped something out on page 12 of the whole thing, that's a different deal. But the vast majority of comic books you'll ever encounter in life, you will know just at a glance. Oh yeah, that's VF. Oh yeah, that's that's NM. Etc. So you can get quick at it, and it really does pay to do it. The other thing I'm going to say about it is do it once. You can't avoid it. A lot of people, they say, look, my comic books have been piling up on me for ages. I'm finally going to go and get them into Comic Base, something like that. I'm just going to put them all as near mint, and I'll go back later on if people start buying them. Then I'll figure out what the grades really were. Dude, that's a lot of sympathy for you, man, because it does feel like a big job when you take all this stuff on. but you're making more work for yourself. First of all, the truth is you're never going to go back and want to regrade that book. What's really happens is you're going to post it as if it was near mint. Someone's going to buy it, and you'll either go to ship it to them, and you'll realize, oh yeah, that wasn't so good. And then suddenly you don't have like a little 30-second problem where you change a grade. Suddenly you got like a whole project where you got to go back and forth with this guy, regrade the thing, try to renegotiate a price, deal with all the hurt feelings and the trouble and the whole thing, and you're repeating that for every book that you ever posted. Don't do this to yourself. Your future self will kill you. They always say, like, one of the guides of being happy in life is try and make it so that future self appreciates what past self did to you. So be a good past self to your future self, and don't screw them over. And one of the ways you can screw them over is by not grading the books and putting them in anyway. You just don't do it. It's, get it done, but get it done once. There are some options. You can use in extremis to say, look, I'm going to put the book in as ungraded, at which point it's going to give it a rough value of 20% of near mint. But man, if you have books that are worth anything at all, you will see you're paying a big, big price, even an approximate valuation for putting your books in as ungraded. And when you go to sell them in any venue, you'll pay even more of a discount on the whole thing, because when people say ungraded, they're like, well, does that mean it's shot to hell and you just don't want to tell me? I mean, they're factoring in that fudge factor that you're putting in there. They're having to add another layer of fudging on top of the grade already, when they think, well, you said VF, but is it really VF, or is it really more like VF minus? The more they trust you, the more they're going to believe your grade and your valuation. If you're very consistent, that's not a problem. But if you kind of indicate that you have a lot of grading misses on the whole thing, that people will just mentally deduct 2 or 3 grades from any kind of offer that they make you on the book. So just don't do it. Take the heart, take the bitter pill, but get it done. You will thank yourself in the future. All right. Let's see. Oh, and we're comparing drink recipes. So I'm just checking the chat as we go here. Beach Price says CGC recently put up their grading guide as well. Not that I think it's any better than Overstreet. I don't. It gives you an insight on their grading philosophy. Yeah. Man, we have gone show after show on CGC's grading philosophy. Realistically, the standard is Overstreet's grading guide. I don't see a reason that needs departing from. CGC, CBCS, and so forth all claim to follow the same kind of ideas on those things. Sometimes they'll tweak around the nth degree, and honestly, you don't need to get, if you can hit things to the full Overstreet grade, you're doing better than 90% of the people out there. If you want to get into split grades and half grades and pluses and things like that, that's cool. And there is a little bit of room to wobble on that one. But honestly, in my experience, it's rare to see a company, whether it's a live comic shop or an online retailer, that will consistently hit Overstreet grades in terms of even just the full grades. Knowing the difference between VG and fine, and hitting it every time. If you can hit that, you are one of the most trustworthy guys in the business. But do make the effort to hit that. And like I say, don't grade against yourself if you don't have to. I mean, it will save you some amount of trouble to say, yeah, okay, it's like, I didn't want, hurt anyone's feelings, so I just undergrade everything by a grade. You can do that, but it's expensive. The one metric I usually give people as a tip on this whole thing is when you're grading, especially when you know what you're doing, the way to keep yourself honest is pretend you're buying the book, not that you're selling it. Because when you're buying the book, you will be as finicky as the devil about the whole thing. You will really grade the son of gun out of the darn thing, and you'll want to get what you paid for. When you're selling the book, it's like everything else. It's like we always want to, see ourselves in the best light. Well, we always want to see our books in the best light. It's like, well, that stuff wasn't too bad. Lose all the sympathy, but grade the book like like you're buying it, and you'll be a lot better. You'll hit the grades a lot more. All right. Well, that's pretty much it. And we're getting this. Well, I do have, there is a CGC, well, I'll have a few things to say about that at the end of the show. But let's push on. All right. Tip number 3. And let's go over to Media Pool on this one. File it or display it. So make files, not piles. So Here, I'm going to go in and I'm going to, do my best to channel Marie Kondo and the whole thing. So Marie Kondo is the, if you ever see, I forget which channel she was on, but she was this chipper, Asian lady who comes in there, she's this little dainty little thing, and has very good attitude about everything. And she goes in and tells people that, well, basically in the nicest possible way that yes, your houses are awful. They are cluttered and rotten, and you need to get rid of so much stuff because you will have a much happier life if you do. And she's a bit of a interior design craze, and her design mostly consists of getting rid of things. She's all about the home simplification business. There is one thing I will absolutely agree with her on, and that is make sure that whatever you're doing, the goal for anything that surrounds you in your living environment is either ought to be really functional. It ought to do what it does, with no problems, no glitches. It does its job, or it ought to be beautiful. It ought to bring some kind of joy to you, that you're seeing it up on the wall. And same thing goes for your comic books. I mean, especially goes for your comic books, is, either make them functional. I mean, in other words, once you're done reading them, put them away in a place where you can get to them, very quickly without a lot of effort, to where they're going. There's not a lot of hassle about the whole thing. They're stored accurately, they're stored adequately to protect them, but they're out of your way. They're off your brain. Or alternately, make a collection visible. I mean, take your action figures. I mean, you can see around me, I collect robots. I collect, Fallout stuff, and so forth. But make it pretty, make a display of it. So, I mean, I could be sticking, tin toys. Well, I mean, I'll this way, the tin robots I don't like very much are in storage boxes up in an attic. They are in a pile, but they're out of sight, out of mind. The ones I do like are in a display case, right? Do the same thing with your comic books. On the Christmas pre-show, we went through the gift list, and we point out to a number of places where they have like really nice frames for framed comic books. The same thing goes for original artwork, action figures. One of the coolest comic rooms I've ever seen. It was a guy who has the world record for the largest comic book collection. But the funny thing is all his comics were just meticulously filed away out in his garage, with the exception of just a handful of really, really cool ones where like he'd replicated like a spinner rack from an old-fashioned comic book store in next to his lounge area with the TV. He had collections based on groupings of like the Batman black and whites. They were all framed up there next to the black and white action figures, and so they actually formed kind of a little. Everywhere you looked and everything, there was a concentrated area in his house that was really beautifully done to illustrate, the part he loved about that particular property. It wasn't just tossed around everywhere. It was really well thought out, but because of that, he also took 98% of the stuff he had, and it was just stored. It was just, meticulously filed. I know because his lovely wife was the one who kept on calling us up for tech support on things, because I think she did most of the work. But it got done, and as a result, he got the chance to really enjoy his collection. So yeah, file it file it or display it, but don't do both. Now, some other notes just on that. Let's see. When you're filing, in order to make filing possible, filing is where a lot of this falls down for a lot of people. Some things that I would say to make this possible for people is, number one, make sure you can get to any given item in your collection without moving another box to get to it, right? So if you ever have to, like if I want to access my Batman, the Dark Knights, or whatever else, and I got to pull the box with Action Comics off on top of it in order to file it, it is a sure bet that I will not be filing that book anywhere. What's going to really happen if I have to rearrange boxes in order to get to a particular box I want to get to is, number one, I will resist getting to the box in the first place. But if I ever pulled the thing out again, it's never going back in that box, because I don't want to do the same work in reverse. If you have to move any boxes around in order to get stuff, find another solution. It's not worth it. I mean, I would say not even a single box. I would, I wouldn't stack two boxes on top of each other unless they opened up like a drawer, like the collection drawer boxes, where you literally can just slide them out. and gets them like a file drawer. Our mod, Greg Hecht, made a big investment in very involved, very sturdy file cabinets. Which at some point I'm going to have to, convince him to do a show and tell of his comics room because I'm curious about that. But if you invest in properly kind of steel case sort of file cabinets, it's possible to get the equivalents of comic boxes worth of stuff in a very dense format factor where again it just smoothly rolls out. You can file something, you smoothly roll it back, and you never rearrange things to get to stuff. That's definitely a way to go. Another way to go, don't overlook it, bookshelves. Bookshelves are great. And one of the things I really have enjoyed is every once in a while you get something where, like if you guys know the Eagle Moss graphic novels, which I've shown a couple times before on the show, um, where if you take all of them, the spines, if you arrange them all together, form a ginormous picture of, it's an series of Alex Ross paintings of the Justice League and, Justice Society and so forth. And so when those are all on a bookshelf and they're filed properly, they're also beautiful to look at. It's actually, just to the right of my desk right now is all my Eagle Moss graphic novels and those things. But yeah, make it so that, it's easy to file, and when they're filed, they're put away and you can get to them nicely. Last thing I'd say is, um, make sure if you possibly can that the physical organization of your comics matches their logical organization, which is to say, don't make dump boxes. One thing that a lot of people will do is they'll because they're piling boxes and it's a lot of trouble to get to, like I say, something that isn't right on top. They'll say, okay, well, I got this week's new comic books in. I'm going to scan them all in, beep, 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 beep. And say, these are all going to be in box number, and then, okay, 32 is the last box. This will be 33. So you write 33 on the box. They dump them in box 33. If they're really good, they'll use a custom field in Comic Base and say, okay, these are all in box 33. And then, they'll keep going, and then 34, 35, 36, 37. But they're just random collections of stuff in roughly chronological order for when they picked it up. This, in the short term, seems like a win, and I get that. I get why people do it. In the long term, it's terrible. I'll put it this way: if you ever think you're going to need to get to the comics in question individually, in other words, I need to lay my hands personally on Batman the Dark, Gotham Knights #9, which is stored in box number 23. All right. If you think that's a thing that will ever happen to you, that you're going to need to do that, you do not want to organize your comic books that way. The reason is because if all I know about them is that they're in a particular box, and let's say I'm storing them in a long box, which when they're bagged and boarded will hold about 200 comic books. That guarantees, if I've done nothing else, if I'm just literally just dumping them in the box and saying, oh yeah, they're in box 43, I'm going to look for, on average, 100 comic books once I've found box 43, because I'm going to open up that, I'm going to uncover that box. I'm going to start flipping through the comic books, and then I'm going to, eventually get, on average, you're going to go through half the box. So that's 100 books before you find the one comic book that you were looking for. Don't do it to yourself. It's, again, future you will hate past you. Past you saved a couple minutes, not filing things in any kind of logical order, but future you will want to kick your butt. So be nice to future you. And yes, the other thing I'd say is, if this is my bonus tip. Yes, and I actually wrote this down as a big bonus tip. This is my way of getting like 6 tips in for 5. If you are ever going to file a comic book or retrieve a comic book, stick a label on it. I can't tell you how important that is. Just, look at any given comic book on the market today. I guarantee the title on one level or another is ambiguous. It's just because it says Flash number 783. Well, is that Flash first series, second series, third series, or, yes, again, flipped around again, first series again? Is it Flash, not Flash Comics? Is it not Flash, Flash Forward, and so forth? And let's not even get into the millions and millions of titles that flip publishers, the titles that are kind of ambiguous, where the title on the cover does not agree with its official index title, and then forget about variants. I mean, is this the J edition of Vampirella versus Red Sonja? I mean, who the heck knows? No, if you're ever going to stick this thing in a box, stick a label on it first. It feels like extra work. We have timed it again and again, and it always winds up being this, a lead pipe cinch as far as how much time we save, even with the cost of labeling. I mean, even not even factoring in the cost of retrieving the book, the cost to file the book in the first place is negated. It's faster to file them in the first place, even with the time required to label the book, that is to take an unlabeled book and file it most of the time. So if we gave our staffers, stacks of like 20 books, and we said, okay, we need to file these, and these are guys who work with comic books all day long, so they know the field. And even then, what happens is they go and say, "Oh yeah, I know this one. This new Guardians of the Galaxy. Yeah, I know this one. This new Green Lantern." And then they get to the first series, the second series, and suddenly they got to put the book down, flip open the bag, read through, find the indicia. So no, all that stuff goes away if you just take the time and stick an ID label on it. So do yourself a favor, do future you a favor, label your books. All right. Let's see here. What else we got here? Richard Scott points out prestige formats still hit about £1 a book, 300 pounds on a bike. Something's wrong about that. Yeah, I don't know how you get three. Well, I don't know. I mean, when we weigh out our long boxes, because we had to do this when we were moving offices, the heaviest one that the lightest one we'd have weighed a bit over 30 pounds. The heaviest one we had weighed a bit over 50 pounds. Nothing crazy in that, but do they get heavy? You're right, darn right. So if you don't work out with weights, especially that is your weight exercise right there. K Broom points out, I gave up on long boxes after the first time, one of them caused me to miss 2 weeks of work trying to move them. Yeah, no kidding. I very much am in the camp of saying, just don't be in the box moving business. Get your storage, get it to be something where you don't need to shuffle around, stack them. Because we were when we first we were evaluating, is it worth investing in drawer boxes? One of the time tests we did is we took a bunch of our staffers. There's one guy who was working for us time who was just like Mr. Fitness. I don't, he didn't become, this is not, we have a guy who actually did become a personal trainer, but this guy wasn't it. But this guy was like, he was in shape. And we basically figured out, okay, if we give him a comic to file, how long does it take him to file if it's in the first box, where you have to move one box, you have to move two boxes, and when you have to move three boxes? And he said, like, even he was like, yeah, dude, if I have to move three boxes to get something, I'm like, I kind of want to take a lunch break after that. It was too much hassle. But the time required to shuffle and reshuffle the boxes was just psychotic. It took us like 2 hours of running the stopwatch on this one before we just put in a four-figure order with the collection drawer box guys and say, okay, yeah, we're going to need 300 boxes and we need them as soon as you can get to us. Because it paid off in our staff, filing time within months, and not to mention the staff retention as far as them not wanting to quit the job. So that's drawer boxes. But like I say, if you have another solution, bookcases are great if you've got the room for them. One thing to never forget is that you can put bookcases, if you have a large enough space, back to back, like library shelves. That's a very efficient way to go. I've seen any number of ways of storing comic books, but the worst one is the one where you have to move boxes around to get to them. All right, let's see here. All right, and let's go on to tip number 4. All right, and so now we're getting off of the grinded out part of the whole thing. Let's get into something that's a little more of the spiritual side of comic books. All right, try something new every month. All right, now what do I mean by that? All right, what is a lot of us have been collecting the same kinds of things for long periods of time. I mean, I grew up on Spider-Man and Daredevil and the X-Men, and man, I stuck with them through college. I stuck with them when I had no money. I stuck with them through, I got, there were things that were great, like the Frank Miller years of Daredevil. And there were things like, the Dave Cockrum, which then into the John Byrne years of X-Men, which was amazing. And unfortunately, I also stuck with them through all the things that happened after the, John Byrne years on the X-Men, which is to say that I probably bought 60 issues of the X-Men and ready for one of them saying, "Gah, that wasn't very good." So, I mean, after a while, you can just get burned out. I mean, you feel like you've got the investment in these things. You feel like you've got a run going. Damn it, it's like, and it's hard to give up on the whole thing. But one thing you'll find out if there's too many things like that in your life is you just kind of get burned out in comics. Period. One way you can avoid all that is have there be a feeder system in your life that's going to feed you new things that are outside your beaten path. So, for instance, there is a huge world of comic books that goes beyond Marvel, DC, Image, those sorts of superhero type things. Try a different genre. If you've been reading superhero books, try a mystery. Try different publishers. Try, if you've been, picking up Spider-Man and Deadpool, try whatever that weird title Marvel's cranking out this month, or someone else's that just looks like it might be cool. Again, it's not a commitment, and one of the reasons that you don't want to have continuity that stretches a million years is because you do want to make it so someone can jump onto a series, almost anywhere and have some idea what's going on. If you're in the middle of an incredibly convoluted 38-part story, it's very hard to jump in on part 17 and have any sense what's going on. But most comic books are not that unapproachable that way. At the very least, they'll try to get you to speed. But check a few things out that way. Beyond that, consider different formats. There's magazines, manga, bande dessinée, which, God, it's hard for me to say as an American. Bande dessinée, which basically is French for bound strips. It's comic books for if you're Franco-Belgian. But I mean, these are the guys who gave us heavy metal and Tintin and Blueberry and all the great work of Mebius and things like that. I mean, some of the coolest stuff out there was originally published as like these French, bande dessinée types of things. I personally have tried a bunch of manga. It doesn't seem to be for me, but my goodness, there is so much of it these days. There's so many things to try, and even then, things were like, maybe I will check out, a few things. It took me forever to even get Akira. I mean, it's like, the first manga I think I ever knew was, oh God, what was the giant robot one? Gigantor. Watching that in the 70s and reruns in black and white on my TV. So yeah, I mean, when the manga explosion came in, I was like, I don't know if this is my thing. It took, I got to read this thing backward to front or front, where else? I mean, like this is weird for me. But I mean, even I can appreciate there's a lot of interesting stuff going on out there, and yeah, there's some things I'm thinking, yeah, that might be worth checking into, especially I got turned on to, like, for instance, a lot of us watch Squid Game on Netflix, and so it kind of introduces you to like this kind of Korean battle royale type, which by the way speaking also is Battle Royale was a comic book before it was a movie. But yeah, lots of neat stuff out there. There's something for everyone. Check out some different stuff. Beyond that, not everything has to be a comic book. If you love the comic book art form, if you love that style of graphic storytelling or that bigger than life thing that comic books bring with it, check out art books, check out portfolios. Dial in on like a retrospective or a portfolio for an artist you particularly admire. Just mix it up. You don't just need to be cranking on the same 24-page, 32-page comic books every month. And sorry, and while we're at it, you don't need to just limit yourself to just strictly comic books. Novelizations. I mean, like I love Aliens as a movie. I loved it as a comic book. Turned out they'd written a bunch of really good, Aliens novelizations, which got me through many an airplane ride. As doing consulting. So yeah, mix it up. It's just adding something new to your life, just as you go as a collector. Just it keeps the whole thing fresh, and it keeps the joy in there. Just when something's getting stale, it gives you somewhere else to go. And then lastly on this one is look to indie. When you go to something like a lot of the more interesting comic books these days are being published through Kickstarter or Indiegogo or so forth. Now, and I'm going to say they're interesting. Doesn't mean they're good. I mean, I've seen both good and terrible things come through these things, but it is the starter leagues that the majors really aren't doing as much anymore. It used to be that the major labels were pretty, were pretty good at having indie tryout books or having like farm team labels. Like Marvel had Epic, DC. I forget what let's see. There was Atlas Comic Books was kind of like a wannabe starter one, the new Atlas from the 70s and so forth. Um, but there are different places where farm team guys would go to, strike out on their own, or to, go through the rank, or to try something new or try somebody new. I love the early '80s explosion days of like Epic Comics, First Comics, Pacific Comics, all those guys, because you start seeing like people taking on comics, but in a direction you had never seen before. And the nice thing about those is you could get them down at your local comic store. You could kind of leaf through them, see if it looked like something you'd wanted ahead of time. These days, yeah, we've got things like Image does a pretty good job. I mean, man, if you knew Image from the '90s and what they were putting out then, and you said, "Wow, would some of the most interesting comic books out there be coming from Image?" And you asked in that in 1992, in terms of just different types of content, not just over muscular superheroes. Never would have dreamed that the company would become what it has in terms of just its variety and everything. Everything from The Walking Dead to I think Radiant Black or whatever else. Just crazy amounts of stuff. Uh, but beyond those comic companies and the whole thing, a lot of the action in solo creators in particular has moved to Indiegogo or Kickstarter. At some point, every once in a while, take a browse over there and see if there's anything that catches your eye. And if so, it's also a nice way to get a kind of a personal, touch with a creator, because you're going to be laying out like 25-30 bucks probably to get a single graphic novel from them. But they'll know they'll know your name. You'll know you'll probably get it signed from them. It sometimes it'll come. You can buy custom editions, prints, whatever else, script pages. I mean, I've seen everything except blood from the creator on these things, depending on how hard they want to get things funded. But it really is kind of fun to just reestablish that kind of communication with the creator. And while you're at it, if to the extent you can, go out and visit the small press tables at comic shows and see what people are shopping around there, and see if you can find an excuse to drop a few bucks with them. They appreciate it, and you'll probably look. There's a reason a lot of these guys are independent, is because they haven't really got their skills up to the level in order to make it into the bigs. But some of them are never going to be in the bigs, and they're still going to be really, really interesting. I'm blanking his name right now, but like the guy who did Hellboy, Mike Mignola in Hellboy, or oh gosh, I'm sorry. This is Art Adams. Art Adams had a good career at Marvel, but all these guys did a lot of amazing stuff as independent creators. And honestly, it seems like where their home base is, where they're happy being mid-sized, control their own destiny kinds of folks. But yeah, check them out. There's a lot of interesting guys out there. All right. And all right, last thing I want to say about that one is tip number 5. Collect what's worth reading, not just what's worth money. All right, so look, this could be a little bit of a slam at CGC. It could be honest, it could be a little slam at Comic Base. I mean, we spend a lot of our time talking about the value of comic books. Every time you download a weekly update, it's going to tell you, all right, hey, you have this many more comic books or less comic books, and this is how your collections change value. And it'll tell you that every week, and I think that's cool. I love that the investment of comic books is viable. It has a real liquidity issue. I mean, it isn't like you can just go down and cash them down at the bank, unless they're high-end, golden age, which case, just about. But as a long-term investment, comic books are just, they're damn near ideal, as far as I can say, because when I was first, I did my first comic show as a dealer, when I was 13 years old, at was it it wasn't the, God, what was the name of the Leamington Hotel in Minneapolis? If you guys were at that, you guys remember the Minneapolis scene of things. I just want to say the guest of honor at that show that year was C.C. Beck from Captain Marvel, and I actually got to meet him. He actually signed something for me. I didn't know what Captain Marvel was. I was such a Marvel boy at that point. I thought, oh, it's something to do with the new guy. I was a little bummed out that it was like this old goofy looking dude, from Shazam. But anyway, it's like, yeah, I've been doing this a long time. But one of the things I loved about comic books from a very early age is that you could buy a comic book at that point for like 35, 40 cents, stick it in a 2 or 3 cent, plastic bag for a comic book, read it, right? You could get all the enjoyment out of the collectible, and then stick a price tag on the front of it later on for 75 cents or a dollar, and make more than your money back. So, I mean, it's the ultimate thing. It's like you literally had a you can have your cake and eat it too collectible, where it's like you got to enjoy it in its full form. But at the same time, you could also they had value if you took care of them, where if you just wait a few months or whatever else, people will pay you more than you paid to get it, to pick up that issue. uh, this is amazing, and some of us, especially consider the longer term, have done very well with comic books. I mean, we have people who have comic base who have multi-million dollar collections. That's not even a rare thing these days. But I think the thing we never want to forget is that comic books are fun. They're meant to be read. And if you patronize the things that you love reading, that you actually will take the time to read and you enjoy for the reading, you're going to be in a better, I don't know, just kind of almost like a spiritual place at the end of the day. Because again, you've done the ultimate swindle. You've got to enjoy the thing and you've made money off of it. Terrific. Whereas more and more, it feels like there's forces in the comic industry that want you to buy things that you're not going to read. They're like 73 versions of the same comic book. It's the thing with the chromium cover with the limited foil edition print, blah 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 blah. Most of these things, they're like almost like vinyl records for hipsters. They're going to go up on a wall, or they're going to get stuck in a file, or they're going to put on eBay or whatever else, and they're never going to get opened and enjoyed for what they are. And honestly, a lot of times, if you did take the time to open up them and enjoy them, you'd be like, yeah, this is 24 pages of very thin gruel that I just paid $8.99 for. That it's not great. And even if you manage to turn that at a profit later on, it kind of leaves an empty spot in your soul. It doesn't feel good. Uh, and beyond that, you've got the problem where, like, the market's going to make more of the things people buy. And so if you're buying things based on, like, just fads and investability, especially on a very short term, things like variants and stuff like that, or for that matter, slabbed books and so forth. If you're buying based on that, the market's going to reward it. It's going to drive the prices of those sorts of things up, and it's going to produce more of those sorts of things. Conversely, you can have a virtuous circle. That's the opposite of a vicious circle, where if you're buying things you genuinely love. I mean, the first people who bought Walking Dead genuinely loved it. The first people who bought Hellboy genuinely loved it. And the fact that these things become expensive later on, or I was thinking Madman was the creator I was looking for earlier on. But I mean, the fact that these things become popular later on, or Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, is because, yeah, people related to it. I mean, if you saw a cover of Cerebus #1 or Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles #1, it looked like the most forgettable book on the planet until you open it up and say, hey, there's something really kind of cool going on here. And then that becomes, the thing everyone's going to want to follow later on, if you take the time and learn to love it. If these things had come out, is just foil varianted covers of something that we've all seen and been bored with before, I don't know. It doesn't set up a world where you're going to start producing more and more good content. And I think, as much as we can, we should enjoy the fact that, like I say, we are in the ultimate have your cake and eat it too profession, where, like, you can buy things you love, you can read them, put them away, treat them nicely, and at some point we decide you want to put them for sale, and almost all the time get more for it than you paid. And yeah, I'd like to see that be more the norm, so that we can drive more comic books that are the type that we would enjoy ourselves. Anyway, so that's pretty much it. That is kind of the deal here. Let's see here. Larry's Library says, don't buy comics that I don't plan to read. Good idea. It says, totally against CGC because slabbing reduces comics to nothing more than a baseball card. Yeah, I mean, slabbing, its effect is it transforms a comic book into a different type of collectible. It's it's like anything else, a base, call it a baseball card, but it reduces the number one thing that makes a comic book and not just a, plastic coated piece of art. Um, which is the fact that you can open it up and read it. If you can't immerse yourself in the story, or like some people will buy like a slabbed copy for investment, they'll buy a separate copy like in reprint form, or a digital copy or something like that to actually like enjoy. I just don't know how supportable that is over the long term, because I mean, in a way, you're kind of training your head to be really super mercenary about the one thing and not just to enjoy the comic book aspect of it. And you're also training the market to produce more things that are just investment vehicles. And so they don't actually need to have any content in the pages that's worth anything. They just need to be investable on some level. And it just, like I say, it sets a bad incentives for the industry, and it kind of gets you more bad stuff. Um, let's see here. And Oro says, yeah, sadly, the old Leamington was torn down long ago. Wow. Okay. Yeah. Sorry about that. Yeah. No, that's I was stunned. The Leamington Hotel in Minneapolis, 13 years old. And my parents let me book a room and stay by myself overnight because they didn't want to have to drive me 35 miles in from Cottage Grove to do day two of the show. They're like, nah, just, when you're done, with your booth for the night, just, stay overnight. We'll come pick you up on Sunday. It's like, wow, that was an astonishing amount of trust for parents, especially. That was the late 70s, early 80s or something. But man, I think these days my parents would probably be brought up on charges. But that was childhood was different back in the day. All right. Well, anyway, our model wants to remind everyone as we get to close the top of the hour. We have a dedicated thread on this content-based message boards where you can request topics and demos to live stream. Yes, next week out, we will be doing more of a conventional show where we'll actually be trying to answer as many of your tech questions as we possibly can. I have a couple of tech tips to show you, but really wanted to have the next episode be just a tech extravaganza. So bring your questions and please post them to the stream, and we'll hit as many as we can. All right, guys, I think that just about does it. Oh, wow. Oh, I'm sorry. Oro says the Beatles stayed there in '65. Dang, that's really cool. I had no idea. Yeah, I just knew it was like the one comic show in town back when I was a kid growing up in the Midwest. So that's where the action was. I traded under the name of Park's Best Comics as I was going to Park Junior High School at the time. So anyway, all right, guys, that's about it for me. And I see my dog is looking for a walk down there. He's woofing up a storm. So I'm going to let y'all go. Thanks, everyone, for coming. And I hope you enjoyed the show. Tell your friends, and we'll catch you next time. Take care. Bye-bye.